What inspired the dildo?
Everybody's trying to come up with different things to scratch with, and I just thought, well, what's the craziest thing you could think of? So that was, what I came up with. Jumpin' Perez also
Julian
scratched.
Perez was scratching over house music?
And doing tricks. Yeah, we always had 2 copies of every record, and we would always do little repeats and little tricks.
With house music?
With house music, yeah. And they had these semis where they would take the whole, back of the semi off and just have a flat part, and they put sound systems on it, people dancing, and they would drive these semis through the streets. Then DJs would play at the ending too. So there's music going all the way through the streets, and I think it was, hundreds of thousands of people.
It's Powertools, and we got Bad Boy Bill in the house. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing all right. It was a long day, but here I am. I made it.
Act like I haven't seen you for the last 48 hours straight.
Exactly.
So it's awesome to have you at the Sirius Studios here in L.A. You've had releases on Night Service, We Jack, Aliens and Mushrooms. You're the label boss of Moody and IHR. You've won various magazine awards for Best DJ of the Year. You're a legend. You've DJed all over the world. But I want to go back to the beginning, and specifically, I want to know what inspired you to start scratching over house music, because you were the first person I've ever heard do it. I don't know if you were the first, but if you weren't the first, talk to us about who inspired you, or were you the first?
I definitely was not the first.
Okay.
I was inspired, when I first started DJing, by breakdancing and kind of the early Beat Street and breaking and those movies, and there was always a DJ up there scratching, and so that was one of the inspirations. But the guy that I heard doing it on the radio when I was listening to mixes in Chicago was Farley Jack Master Funk. He was one of the first guys scratching over house music, early on. So he was an inspiration. Julian Jumpin' Perez also.
Julian Perez was scratching over house music
and doing tricks. Yeah, we always had 2 copies of every record, and we would always do little repeats and little tricks
with house music.
With house music, yeah, it was crazy. And there was, before I was listening to those guys on the radio, there was guys in my neighborhood who would take 2 copies of Purple Rain by Prince and do tricks with that.
Okay, so doing tricks with Purple Rain and It's Time and all that was done.
That was all
done. That was done, but house music just seems so foreign to me.
Right. Well, it was all, we were playing everything. So house came along in 84-ish, so we were already doing tricks prior to that. So you had these other songs that were 82, 83, back in the early days.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, and then, there was other DJs that came along, either after the same time, James Avila, A-Track, but I feel like you took the art of scratching, over house music to another level. What inspired you to, keep on practicing and doing tricks and just,
Yeah, no, it's a funny story because I got on the radio super young, 16 years old when I got on the radio as a mix show DJ. And a couple years after that, DMC battles started really gaining a lot of notoriety, and people are like, dude, you got to represent Chicago. I'm like, I'm already on the radio. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. They're like, no, we need you to be in the battle. I'm like, who do I need to battle? I'm on the radio. And so, a lot of people pushed me to hey man, you need to get in the DJ battle. So that actually made me practice harder and really work on how do I, so I won the Midwest Championship for DMC, went to the finals in San Diego in 88. A lot of people didn't know about that 88 battle in San Diego. I battled Cash Money, came in second to him. He went on to win the world title in 88, and then in 89 is the video that everybody's seeing when I battled DJ Aladdin, and he won the U.S. championship that year. But
is that the video where you're scratching with the dildo?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Now let's just. What inspired the dildo?
Everybody scratched with their elbows and their, just a basketball. Everybody's trying to come up with different things to scratch with. And I just thought, well, what's the craziest thing you could think of? So that was, what I came up with. And that was like the 3rd or 4th time I had already done it. I had done it the year before in 88. So they knew it was coming. So they cut that off as soon as I tried to pull that one. Literally.
They literally said, we can't do this.
No. We saw this last year. No.
That's amazing. Well, what about scratching your name? The first time I ever met you, you had brought out, I was in a group called The Movement.
Yep.
You had brought us out to perform at Chicago.
Yep.
You DJ'd afterwards. I don't even know who you are, like, at that point in time. And all of a sudden I hear, "Chicka bad boy Bill," and you're scratching your name. And I'm like, A, he's scratching over house music, which to me is foreign. B, he's scratching his goddamn name.
Yeah.
Like,
what's wrong with this guy?
No, I was just like, this is wild.
So the funny part is I made that vinyl with the Bad Boy Bill as for the DMC battle. So this is how, kind of what we did for the Back to Vinyl tour. I actually pressed a record for the battle. So it said DMC battle tonight, Sucker DJs Phil with Fright, fucking it up on the wheels, Bad Boy Bill. So that part is from, and then I actually was repeating it. So that's kind of the concept. And then I just took the little thing of my name and used that from then on, just as a little scratch thing. But yeah, it came from the DMC battle.
Has anybody ever scratched their name over house music?
I've never heard it. I don't think anybody ever wanted to.
But it is so iconic and so dope. Like, it's just interesting that nobody else has like done it.
Yeah.
James Hype, you gonna scratch your name?
Well, we used to take a lot of heat because I had name drops in my mixes when I was on the radio, and we did that because when people would tune in, and we had hour-long mixes on the radio, you never knew who you were listening to. So every 10 or 15 minutes, we throw a name drop, and that's where the Bad Boy Bill's in the mix and he's live understand came from. Came from me, from the mix shows.
Right.
And then people are like, yeah, but why are you still doing it? This isn't a mix show anymore. I was like, I don't know. It's kind of like my thing.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know. I got used to it, but, it is a little weird. You'd be at a rave somewhere and it's 4 a.m. and you're playing and then a name drop comes on. And people are like, that's like weird.
Was there ever a time you stopped scratching your name, like, for, a few years where you're like, I'm not doing it?
I'm kind of sick of this. Yeah, I always go through those moments where I'm like, like pull back on drops, pull back on names, and just keep it more about the music. So you got to go through those phases.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then people are always in the crowd like looking at me going, I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm going to scratch, relax. Like, give me, like, I'm not going to scratch every song, It's like, it's pretty funny.
That's amazing. So you are, manipulating the music through scratching and tricks. And there are DJs today like, James Hype that are manipulating the music using technology, the new generation of tricks. How do you view the James Hype's types of DJs?
I think it's really cool. I think anytime I see DJs that are out there and they're doing more than just jumping up and down, I think it's cool. Like that's what got me interested in DJing from the very beginning is doing cool things with the music. That's kind of remixing on the fly. And when I look at some of the transitions he comes up with and looping things and then bringing another song in or wordplay, I think all that stuff is really cool. And it's just another way to express yourself. I'm not saying that just playing great music and programming a great set, because there's DJs that do that better than anybody. Right. But it's also cool when you can add kind of what I call like the icing on the cake. It's just these little sprinkles of like, this is a cool transition, and I'm going to loop this, and I'm bringing this other song in, and I just always think. I remember. Just seeing different guys. There was a, and I can't remember. There was a transition DJ Vice used to do with, and I forget the song, but it was like a dubstep song, and it had a wordplay in it. But just seeing those little moments, I think it can elevate a mix. I think it's cool.
100%. Now, you're a Beatport co-founder. We know all the stories about the tough starts, the tough beginnings. I want to know, when did you and the team realize that this thing is working? This is the future. Like, it's go time.
It was really tough, because when we first started, it was Napster had just kind of stolen music from everybody, technically, and nobody wanted to give us, waves. We were like, we need high quality, copies of your music digitally, and they're like, yeah, right, you're going to sell it and you're going to report to us and give us money every time you sell it. So it was very difficult getting labels to sign on. But I think we opened up a office in Germany, and it was in Berlin actually, and Berlin was really hot in the mid 2000s, and they had like a really cool scene, really cool labels. And once we had that office and we started getting some really cool European labels, I think it started to click, and because then it wasn't just America, it was like we were getting global.
Was there a specific label that you guys got, and you went, "Wow, we got this, we're rolling"?
I mean, like the American DJ Gigolo, or International DJ Gigolo, that label. I mean, a lot of the Berlin labels were just there was just cool labels, like DJ Hell's label, and just different labels that just had the pulse of electronic music at the time, and Berlin was just the spot. So having that office, and it was through a strategic partnership with Native Instruments that really helped us get that office in Berlin. And I think that once we had the cool labels and we had some cool music, I think DJs were like, okay, this is gonna be a place for us to get music.
Was there ever a point though where like somebody, I mean, who was the first DJ that you saw play a whole set on CDJs?
I don't remember, but I know John Okoviva and Richie Houghton had invested into that Final Scratch company, and they were the predecessor to Serato, and a lot of techno DJs and electronic DJs were using Final Scratch, and that was kind of another path for digital. And then you had the other DJs that were doing the CDJs, and then obviously Serato came along. But I think in the techno and electronic scene, it was more Final Scratch. That's kind of what Richie Houghton and John Okoviva were championing, and I think a lot of DJs started with that.
Who are some of the other co-founders of Beatport?
Jonas Temple, it was really Jonas, a guy named Eloy, me, Brad Roulier from Manufacturer Superstars. So and Sean was. There's a lot of early Liz, a lot of early employees that.
I thought there were some other DJs that were involved too.
It was really Jonas, Eloy, and me and Brad were kind of the first four that were really like. I think it was Eloy's idea, and I think Jonas, me, and Brad went on the first trips trying to get Peter Rahofer's label, Star 69. We actually came to Sirius XM, met with Geronimo in New York. We flew to Canada, met with Agoviva. So a lot of those were, and then we got Agoviva. So
you guys were flying to try to grab a label,
try to get labels, try to get partners. It was so that was the early days. But
in the early days, did somebody just flat out turn you down?
Everybody, right? Or people say they were going to do it, and then we're going to do our own. Like Subliminal told us that. So that was, we went to the meeting in New York. We sit down, we're telling them all the ideas. They're like, yeah, we're going to do it ourselves. We don't need you guys to build us a store. We're like, all right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Gene Ferris just recently said if you covered up the BPM display on CDJs, that 80% of Chicago DJs would still be able to mix on beat because the culture is so strong. And I agree to that. If you did that in LA, probably drops down to 20.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it drops.
Okay.
There's a lot of DJs in LA. They can't mix on beat to save their life if they had to.
Yeah.
Because they don't learn, they've come in, but they're not learning the art.
Okay.
Why is the art of DJing so strong in Chicago?
I think, there was a lot of really good DJs on the radio, like Ralphie Rosario and just a bunch like Julian and a lot of these guys that we all listened to. So, and they had a very high level of blending and keeping, smooth transitions. And so there was a lot of that from the very beginning. So when you have that's the bar, everybody's got to elevate, So I used to tell that story when I would go around and talk to people in different countries. I'm like, dude, there's bedroom DJs in Chicago that'll smoke most of these guys that I hear internationally. You know what I mean? They're just that good.
Right.
And that's just because of what we grew up listening to on the radio and the guys that, the Hot Mix 5 and the guys that started before me.
It's like, I see what you're saying. The bar was so, because you have people like Farley, and then comes you, and then comes what was the next generation of guys after you at B96?
Derek well, I mean, you had I was going to say the club guys like Derek Carter, and he's another really good DJ.
Right.
So. And even though he really was, I don't know if he might have done guest mixes on the radio and stuff, but, even the street DJs, like the guys from Gramophone and all that, so they say, oh man, look at what Derek's doing. Then they got to elevate, and you get DJ Sneaks and you get all these guys that are looking at other DJs that they're hearing. It just elevates your game. It's like being on a good basketball team, right? You're going to have to play better.
Right. That's very interesting, because if if you look at, I'm just looking at LA perspective, we had a dope station with KDAY, but they were playing more hip hop and early electro, and they were really dope. But for house music, and I'm not, until I came along, the quality of mixing wasn't at a high level. So you're right. So we don't have that generation after generation after generation.
Right.
That's very interesting that you said that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to get your take, being from Chicago, being the home of house music. How do you feel about all the subgenres of house today, all the terms? There's tech house, there's melodic house, there's Afro house, house, like right. Funky house.
Right. Well, it was funny when I came to LA first, you guys called the house music we played deep house.
That was dumb.
And I was like, in Chicago, deep house is like Derek Carter or even more underground than that, like really.
I could tell you a story about that very, very quickly. I was at Power 106. They wanted to rebrand this new house music because the first wave of Robin S., Inner City and all that, they wanted to give a new term to house.
Okay.
And I'm like, but it's house music.
Right.
And they're like, but don't you play deep house on Powertools? And they said, yeah, we play deep house. Right. We're going to call it deep house.
Right.
And I'm like, Panther Sagan's not deep house. I was arguing with them. But because they say it on the radio, there was no internet.
Right.
Everybody just went with it.
Right.
This is deep house.
Like that.
And it's Panther Sagan.
Right, which is
it's
hard
percolator.
House, really. Yeah.
Right. Which is crazy.
Yeah, so that's I had the same discussions early on at Beatport, believe it or not. We were going over genres, and I'm arguing with people. I'm like, well, I go, you guys call whatever the hell you want to call it, because I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Like the way we labeled it in Chicago is different. So we had, like I said, deep house to us was almost disco. We would call deep house, like disco and stuff like that would have been deep house. But yeah, it's. And
what were the other terms back then? You had.
So they used to have these house versus beat parties. So beat was kind of another term, which it was like video crash, and like the more tracky stuff was more like beat.
It's called beat house?
Yeah, like they wouldn't call it beat house. They would just call it house versus beat. Beat, it was just called beat. Yeah, so like they'd have parties where it was like house music, which would be more like Love Can't Turn Around or like songs, and then beat was just tracks like Jack Your Body and Video Crash. And so there was always this dynamic between more housey house versus more tracky house, and that's, but
today you have like melodic
Jack and house and I don't know. I mean, it's progressive house, and it's cool. I mean, listen, everybody puts their own spin on it, but at the foundation of it all, it's house music. Which stems from disco. It's kind of what it is.
Right. You had a track recently that we rinsed on Powertools, Rockin' with Avilo. It was on Night Service earlier this year. Sick track. Talk to us about the collab process with Avilo, who's like a newer comer who's crushing it right now, and Sid helping out and eventually signing the song.
It started, the last time you and I played Mayan. It was, or the first time you and I played Mayan. It was. Matt from Perfect Driver had sent me a bunch of tracks, and one of them was the Cherry Tooth Avilo collab, which had the pump in flip.
Right.
And I was like, and he was like, hey man, Avilo's from Chicago, you guys should link up. And so he linked us, and then me and Avilo were like, hey, you want to do something together? And Avilo sent over a track, and I was like, yeah, I like the track, but I'm not feeling the vocal. Let's do something different. And then we just basically worked on it together. And then he was like, dude, you got to add some scratching in it. So then we added that, and just, it became a cool track. And and now we have another one that we're working on together. We've been testing. We actually, even you and I tested it at the Mayan. So it's
that's the Baddest DJ.
Right?
Okay.
So it's a flip of my other song.
Avilo.
Yeah.
Okay. That's dope.
Yep.
That's sick. What does Bad Boy Bill have cooking for the rest of 2025?
What do I have cooking? Just
some collabs.
I got I got the collab with Avilo, the Baddest DJ. We're going to find a home for that. I got something with Jake Shore that we started, and hopefully find a home for that. And just more production, and just I don't know. I just came back from Germany, so I was in Germany DJing out there. So just more touring and more production.
Speaking of the Germany, and I don't even remember this, and I've known you for almost like 30 years. I didn't know you played at Love Parade.
Oh, yeah.
When you showed
Twice.
the video, I was like, wow, how come I don't remember this?
Insane.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Love Parade started, I believe, in Berlin with 100 people or something,
Right.
and it grew to this enormous festival, I would call it. It's not even. It's not a. It's
like
free.
a holiday.
It's like a holiday. Yeah, and they had these semis where they would take the whole back of the semi off and just have a flat part, and they put sound systems on it, people dancing, and they would drive these semis through the streets and then all park at the, I don't know, whatever that monument is in Berlin, and then DJs would play at the ending too. So there's music going all the way through the streets, and I think it was, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people. I don't even know how many people, because
What year were you playing?
This is early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, I don't know what year it started, but this is, probably, X amount of years into it. And then I played again when they moved it. So they moved it from Berlin. Something happened in Berlin where they couldn't do it in Berlin. So they moved it to central Germany. And I played, I think that's the video you saw.
Right.
And that was a ginormous stage. The stage was so big, they made us sign waivers of, if you hurt yourself or fall off the stage, it's not our problem. Like, I've never had to sign that ever going, to go play a DJ gig. But I'm like, all right, I guess I'm signing this. But yeah,
But at the time, did you take it all in? Like, this is Love Parade.
Oh, no, yeah.
Oh my God.
It was that crazy.
You realized the
Insane.
the spectrum.
Insanity.
Of it.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. Still to this day. I guess you could say Lollapalooza and stuff like that, but that's just like one concert at one place, but not in the streets where you're, just on these semis and people are partying all along the street path. And yeah, it's just crazy.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Well, all right, man. Well, we appreciate having you on. I'm glad you're in LA and you got to come by Powertools. It's awesome to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Power tools.